So even though I was baptized and confirmed as a Roman Catholic and went to church most Sundays until I was around 19 years old, I have to say that at this point in my life, I am best described as being a lapsed Catholic. Now, I don't think there's anything that unusual about what I'm describing right now. There are many people who become lapsed Catholics. It's one of the biggest, or it is the biggest religion in the world after all. And many people don't really want to continue going to Mass and don't feel pulled by the Roman Catholic Church in this day and age. Some people become cynical because of some of the scandals in the church. Some people just find they don't really believe in God. But I have found that more and more as I get older, I have found there is quite an allure to the Catholic Church. Whenever I decide to walk inside a church, for example, I'm very impressed not only by the architecture and the artwork, and this is a very Catholic thing, isn't it? All of the idols and all of the stained glass windows and the sense of history and culture that it presents to you. But I just find there's also a feeling that comes over me that is quite nice. There is a feeling of calm when I'm inside one of these churches, and it's hard to know whether that feeling that I'm feeling is coming from the aesthetic value and the artistic value and just being in a church, a Catholic church, especially the cathedrals that you can get in Europe or in Australia here in Melbourne. You know, there's these beautiful cathedrals, and I don't know if it's the architecture doing it to me or if it's the power of the Holy Spirit. I mean, I was going out drinking with a friend last week, I remember, and after having a few pints of Guinness at the local pub, I said goodbye, and I decided to step inside. I think it's St. Francis's cathedral here in Melbourne. Now, it was only a weeknight, so what you find often is there's just some Chinese, Japanese tourists who are very much admiring the Catholic Church, and when you walk inside the church, these are the people that you see. You see Japanese girls, you see Chinese girls, maybe the occasional guy. But I really enjoyed my brief time inside the cathedral, and sure, it had 2 pints of Guinness, so I know that kind of changes how you take in the entire setting and the scene. But it was nice to put holy water on my forehead, to do the sign of the cross, to walk around the cathedral. And it did make me wonder, am I getting a little bit too close to the sun, so to speak? Am I getting closer to becoming a Roman Catholic again? I mean, if I'm going to keep coming into churches like this after a few beers and blessing myself, surely these are the first steps that make you become a Roman Catholic again after years of being a lapsed Catholic. Now, the sun was setting when I was inside this church, and it made a very beautiful impact as the sun passed through the stained glass window and went into my eyes. I felt some sort of a sense of light coming over me. But I also started wondering whether, if I was to go back to the church, whether this would provide a sense of community for me. Unlike many people, I think, who live alone and don't have any friends and aren't married and aren't doing much with their life and are suffering from what we call a meaning crisis. And you can see the appeal in returning to the Catholic Church every Sunday, if only to shake other people's hands or say hi or, you know, see the same people at least once a week, just to give you, I don't know, a sense of belonging to the community. But of course, as I know, I went to church growing up and I didn't really feel part of the community, at least as a teenager, even though I did go to church every week. Maybe it's because I was with my very reclusive Catholic dad. I would always go along with him and he didn't talk to anyone. And you can sort of imagine there are a lot of very reclusive Catholics who just go to church and leave and never talk to anybody. And I can imagine myself being one of them. I could probably go to church every week and still feel alienated from the congregation, but still would be better than nothing, I suppose. Now, of course, it is arguable whether or not I would be going back to the Catholic Church for the correct reasons. And actually, as I left the church and walked in the sun after my few pints of Guinness, I was asking ChatGPT on my phone. I actually use the voice mode on ChatGPT, and I sometimes have long conversations with it as I walk home from the city, and I'd been to the cathedral. And I was telling ChatGPT I was thinking of going back to the Catholic Church, but mainly as a way to meet girls and to get hanky-panky. And ChatGPT still said that it might be good to go back to the church to find the spiritual connections that I'm looking for. And I kept telling ChatGPT, no, it's not spiritual connections, it's physical connections. And ChatGPT just kept saying the Catholic Church would be a great way to meet women. And I had to kind of really spell out to it, like I'm looking for sinful connections. And finally I asked ChatGPT, don't you find something ironic in what I'm saying? And then ChatGPT admitted that there is a bit of an irony that I would be going to the Catholic Church and trying to go to Mass just to pick up girls and have physical connections, because that's not something that is common. Most people who would be wanting to return to the Catholic Church they're more likely to want to do it for spiritual and personal reasons. But of course, there are some people who agree with me. I've got friends who tell me that actually it's not the worst reason to return to the Catholic Church because hanky-panky, to use that term, is a form of spiritual connection, and it is something that, of course, God created. So perhaps there are actually worse reasons. Like, a lot of people become religious in order to just tell people off and condemn other people, whereas if you're going with this vague reason to get hanky-panky without actually doing it and without actually being creepy or lustful about it, it might be a good way to trick yourself to go back to the Catholic Church. Of course, I'm being a bit facetious here. This is not the kind of guy that I am. But it is hard sometimes after all these decades to tell yourself to go back to the church if you don't really have the strong inner voice. Like, I don't know if I'm crying out for meaning in my life. I often fill that void with music or mythology or exploring different cultures and getting a sense of the world at large rather than confining myself into a single religion like Catholicism. Because I always ask myself, well, what about the Orthodox Church? What about the Baptist Church? What about Shintoism, as I've said on this channel? What about Buddhism? What about converting to Islam? I mean, these are all great faiths that I could return to. So what would make the Catholic Church the best faith to return to? Let me know your thoughts in the comments about whether or not you think I would be returning for the correct reasons, or can you convince me? Can you convince me to return to the Catholic Church or influence my decision in some way? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next time.